Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Max Verstappen has revealed a potential obstacle in his fight for the championship. He basically needs to win everything from now until the end of the season if he wants to claim the world driver's crown. However, based on how the car performed in Mexico, he believes there's another track coming up that might not suit the RB21. Can Red Bull sort this out in time? And will it even matter if McLaren nails the next couple of races? Let me know your thoughts down below. Don't forget to hit the like button, and if you're new here, subscribe. There's a ton of drama today. By the way, that right there is the Brazilian Grand Prix trophy. We'll get back to it in a moment. Now about the Colapinto rumor. It's been circulating for a while that he was going to stay with Alpine. Apparently, that's looking very likely now. It hasn't been officially confirmed yet, but it's a strong rumor. Briatore has even said that Franco's been performing at Gasly's level and has improved massively lately.
The implication?
He's got backing, he's got results, and he's not going anywhere. That's probably what most expected. The Brazilian Grand Prix is coming up next week, not this weekend, since we just had the doubleheader. Funny moment here, Hamilton tweeted back in 2022 with a flood of Brazilian flags, and he did it again this year. You can actually see when he got tired of typing all those emojis, he just copied and pasted the whole thing a few times.
Classic Lewis.
Anyway, while we're looking ahead to Brazil, we're still not quite done with Mexico. There's been a ton of talk about what happened at Turn 1. Karan Chandak offered an interesting idea. Every year, that first complex of corners creates chaos in Mexico. He suggested that if they tweaked it a bit, made it more like Bahrain, it might solve the issue.
And you know what? He might have a point.
The run down to Bahrain's Turn 1 is a bit more open, less chaotic. Now, his sketch wasn't exactly artistic, but it did make sense. The current layout in Mexico basically invites drivers to go over the grass. It's happened over and over again. Max, for example, ended up all the way off track, following the red line Chandak drew, nearly brushing the wall before rejoining.
So, what's the solution?
Well, one idea is to just turn that runoff into gravel. Personally, I actually like that turn 1 to 2 sequence. It can set up great battles and switchbacks, especially with the double DRS detection there. You often see drivers defend through turn 1 and then get attacked again into turn 4. So, I don't think we need to make every first corner a Bahrain clone, but maybe add something to stop drivers from cutting across the grass every time.
Gravel? Sure. A moat or a pond?
Probably not great for health and safety, but hey, something to make them think twice. Now, Verstappen's move at the start was incredibly ambitious, going for a 4-wide attempt around the outside. But he, like most of the grid, knows exactly what happens at turn 1 in Mexico. Watching the replays, even Leclerc could have stayed on track if he wanted, but he chose to go across the grass. Max probably wouldn't have gone for such a wild move if he knew he couldn't bail out and get away with it. It was risky, but he knew he could just go wide and rejoin. To be fair, a lot of drivers would have ended up in the wall. It was impressive car control from him to keep it alive. Still, a lot of people are asking questions, even Martin Brundle brought it up. While the focus was on the drama between Hamilton and Leclerc, Brundle pointed out that Verstappen himself might never have actually intended to make the corner. He was pushed wide, sure, but looking at his entry, it's hard to see how he was ever going to make that turn cleanly. So maybe, just maybe, Max's mindset was, if it doesn't work, I'll just bail out and go off. And Brundle believes that any driver attempting something like that should get a drive-through penalty, just to stop the nonsense once and for all. Now, I understand where Brundle's coming from, but I've got a bit of an issue with that idea, because it's such a gray area, right? It's so marginal. Did the driver really intend to do it? Did he not? You'd end up giving drive-throughs to people who were genuinely pushed off the track, while others could just claim, oh, he cut the corner on purpose. If you start handing out penalties that harshly, you risk punishing innocent drivers unfairly. That said, would a strict penalty like that discourage what Verstappen and Leclerc did?
Maybe.
It could go some way towards stopping those overly ambitious first-lap moves. There was also some drama involving Liam Lawson and Carlos Sainz. Lawson wasn't too happy after their contact on the opening lap, which caused him damage. The chain of events was quite interesting. Sainz entered turn 1 right behind Ocon, who had a big snap of oversteer in front of him. That forced Sainz to make a small correction, and as he did, he likely got caught in the dirty air from Ocon's car. He had another twitch, and at that moment, Lawson was coming around the outside. It was really a domino effect. Lawson was in a solid position to attempt a move around Sainz, but Ocon's wobble led to Sainz's correction, and that in turn squeezed Lawson into a tough spot. Then, Sainz had another correction of his own, which sent him straight into Lawson's side. You could see the violent impact. At that stage, Sainz still seemed committed to making the corner, but ahead of him, other drivers had already decided to bail out. Verstappen was on the far left trying to stay off the wall, Piastri had gone deep and lost positions, and then just half a second later, Sainz decided, you know what? Forget it, I'm going across the grass too. Now, did that decision directly cause the contact with Lawson? I'm not entirely convinced. But it's clear that most drivers approach turn 1 in Mexico with the mindset of, if anything goes wrong, I'll just bail out and go over the grass. And that's not the kind of attitude that should be encouraged in Formula 1.
So, do you change the corner layout? Possible. Do you add gravel? Also possible.
But honestly, at this stage, something needs to change before next season. Moving on, Lando Norris and Bierman both topped the power rankings this week. I wanted to mention that now since it connects to the Sainz discussion. Fans were questioning, wait, how did Sainz make the top 10 when he had that turn 1 contact with Lawson?
Fair question.
I'm not sure it was entirely Sainz's fault, but still, he later spun out of the race on his own, so it's surprising to see him ranked that high. Norris and Bierman, though, both received perfect 10 out of 10 scores. Honestly, it's hard to fault either of them, both had exceptional weekends. What is easy to fault, however, is the FIA. The past few days have been filled with controversy after strong speculation that one of the teams had breached the budget cap. I shared my view on this yesterday, that it's entirely plausible some teams came close, or maybe used clever accounting to stay technically compliant. Still, it's caused an uproar. And interestingly, Planet F1 published a detailed breakdown of the whole situation, because the speculation was massive. Multiple sources in the media were saying that McLaren, Mercedes, Williams, or another team might have overspent, whether due to car damage or expensive upgrades. So when the FIA finally announced that everyone was in the clear, except Aston Martin, who apparently just failed to sign a form properly, people were like, hold on a second. Something doesn't add up. Because where there's smoke, there's usually fire. That's why so many fans are now suggesting the FIA is up to its old tricks again. And honestly, you can see why that narrative has gained traction. Planet F1's article pointed out that the situation seemed to change dramatically. It went from a slam dunk penalty is coming for one team to full compliance across the board. So what happened? Were all those multiple, unconnected sources just completely wrong? And why was there a delay in the FIA's announcement? That delay suggests that at some point, certain teams were being looked at closely. And as we said, this wasn't just one rumor. There were plenty of voices saying, watch this space, something's going on. So it's hard to draw a firm conclusion here, other than acknowledging that many people firmly believe an overspend did happen, and that it either went unpunished or was quietly resolved behind closed doors. Either way, the whole situation risks undermining the integrity of the cost cap system, something that's supposed to level the playing field. And now, there are countless questions being raised. Is the FIA really doing its job correctly? Can we actually believe that all the teams were fully compliant? Maybe we'll get more information down the line, but the bigger question remains. Can we trust the FIA to handle the cost cap fairly and transparently? Perhaps in theory, yes. But in practice? That's where the doubts begin. I want to believe the people inside the FIA are genuinely trying to uphold the rules they themselves created, that they're working with fairness and good intentions. But I'm not convinced that they truly have the power, the structure, or even the competence to govern Formula 1 the way it should be governed. That's one major concern. The other, and perhaps even more serious one, is about the FIA's democratic credibility. If you haven't been following this, there's been a power struggle at the top. Laura Villiers, along with Tim Mayer and another candidate, were trying to challenge Mohammed Ben Sulayem for the FIA presidency. But what happened next is nothing short of incredible. Ben Sulayem found a loophole in the election system that effectively allows him to stay in power by default. Here's how: in order to submit a valid candidacy for FIA president, each candidate must also propose a full cabinet of vice presidents from different world regions. One of those regions must be South America. And guess what? There's only one eligible vice presidential candidate from that region, Bernie Ecclestone's wife. She has publicly pledged her support to Ben Sulayem, which means no other candidate can legally submit a complete cabinet. In other words, Ben Sulayem wins automatically, without even facing an opponent.
Outrageous, right?
Now, as expected, Laura Villiers is furious, and rightfully so. She has stated her intention to stand in December's presidential election against the incumbent, but because of this bizarre rule, no one else can run. So, Villiers has taken legal action. She's brought the case to the Paris courts, requesting that the election be postponed until the situation is resolved. The hearing is scheduled for November 10th. Her argument is based on Article 1.3 of the FIA's own statutes, which commits the organization to uphold the highest standards of governance, transparency, and democracy. And that's the key contradiction here. The FIA claims to be democratic, but what we're seeing doesn't reflect that at all. Now, because the FIA is registered in France, the case falls under French law. And Villiers has made it clear, she's not trying to destroy the FIA. Quite the opposite. As she said publicly, "I am not acting against the FIA. I am acting to protect it. Democracy is not a threat to the FIA, it is its strength."
A powerful statement, and fair play to her. She's not alone, either.
Tim Mayer and his FIA Forward campaign are reportedly working closely with her legal team to push this case forward. Villiers also added, "I have twice tried to open a constructive dialogue with the FIA on essential matters such as internal democracy and the transparency of electoral rules. The responses received were not up to the challenge. I am not acting against the FIA." So it's clear, this isn't just about one election, it's about the credibility of the entire organization. The FIA claims to stand for transparency, fairness, and democracy, but right now, it looks more like a closed circle of power than a democratic institution. That's the quote we already saw, but let's move on to what everyone really wants to talk about, the title fight. After the chaos of the doubleheader, we finally get one weekend to breathe, and then it's back to the grind for the final stretch of the season. Over those two races, Austin and Mexico, Max Verstappen picked up 48 points, while Lando Norris collected 43. Behind them came the Ferrari pair, George Russell and Oscar Piastri with 20. And here's the surprising part, Bierman isn't too far behind that pack either. Now technically, Russell could still win the championship. There are 116 points left on the table. That's 4 races times 25 points, plus 2 sprints times 8 points. Russell is 99 points adrift, so mathematically, it's still possible. Realistically though, once we're through Brazil, that possibility will probably vanish. Let's talk about Max for a moment. It's not something we've discussed much recently, but after all the controversy in Mexico with Hamilton, some wondered whether penalties could come into play, and whether Max was flirting with a race ban. Believe it or not, for a while he actually was. If he'd had another George Russell in Spain-style collision, he could have been banned for a race. But that's no longer the case. His penalty points have dropped from 9 to 6, since his points from last year's wild Mexico weekend have now expired. So, no worries there. Max will be on the grid for all 4 remaining Grands Prix. But here's the bigger picture. Is this title fight real, or just an illusion? On paper, 36 points might not sound insurmountable. But in the grand scheme of Formula One, that's a lot. It just feels smaller because Max has slashed his deficit from over 100 points after Zandvoort down to 36. But remember, that was against Oscar Piastri back then. The leader now is Lando Norris, and right now, Lando looks the stronger of the two. One crucial stat, 15 of the 20 races this season have been won by the driver who led lap 1. And if you count Spa, where Oscar took the lead once the real racing started, that's effectively 16 out of 20. That shows just how vital qualifying is this year. You start first, you control the race. Recently, Verstappen has been a qualifying beast. The RB21 has looked sharp over one lap. But in Mexico, that dominance wavered. The car looked twitchy, unsettled, hard to manage, and no matter what setup direction Red Bull tried, they couldn't get it where they wanted. Max still salvaged 3rd place, a strong result all things considered, but he's wary about what's coming next.
Next up, Brazil.
Historically, it's been hit or miss for Red Bull. Some weekends they've been untouchable, others they've struggled. But after his performance there last year, Max will head into Sao Paulo confident he can get the job done again. And don't forget, it's a sprint weekend, just like Qatar later on. However, what's raising eyebrows is Las Vegas. During the Mexico weekend, reports surfaced that Red Bull were already concerned about the Vegas layout. According to paddock chatter, Max told engineers that some of the same problems they faced in Mexico might resurface under the lights of the strip. Now that's interesting, because Vegas and Mexico aren't exactly similar circuits. Mexico demands high downforce due to the thin air at altitude. Vegas will be at the opposite end, long straights, low drag setups. But if Red Bull thinks the core issue, maybe something in the suspension balance or aerodynamic platform, carries over, that's a serious concern. For Max, that's a potential red flag heading into the title run-in. Because the reality is simple, from here on out, he needs to win everything. If he has even one weekend where he finishes 5th or lower, the McLarens, and especially Lando, will almost certainly outscore him. At this level, even a single off week could decide the championship. So here's the roadmap.
Sao Paulo, next up.
Las Vegas, the big new street circuit spectacle. Then the final tripleheader, Vegas, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, the championship deciders. And looking ahead, it's worth noting, the McLaren tends to shine in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. That doesn't mean Red Bull can't win there. In fact, Max might still have the edge in Qatar, but the balance of power is getting closer. Every setup choice, every qualifying lap, every pit stop from now on could tilt the title one way or the other. Abu Dhabi, that track feels like destiny waiting to unfold. Based on everything we saw last year, it would honestly be shocking if McLaren wasn't the fastest car there. Now, being the fastest and actually winning are two very different stories, because in that Yas Marina finale, pressure doesn't just whisper, it screams. Yet if there's one thing we learned about Lando Norris, it's that pressure doesn't crush him, it fuels him. The way he's grown since this time last year, the way he commands that car, you can sense it. Abu Dhabi could very well be his territory.
Qatar?
That one's a battlefield both Max and McLaren are circling. The McLaren should be formidable there, fast, stable, confident, but Verstappen? He's built for fights like that. You can almost see it, wheel to wheel under the floodlights, the orange and blue McLaren against the raging bull. Brazil tells a similar story. Interlagos has its ghosts for everyone, but Max knows exactly how to exorcise them. He's been untouchable there before, and you can bet he'll walk into Sao Paulo believing he can do it again. But then, there's Las Vegas.
The wild card. The unknown.
And it's not just Max who's uncertain. Sure, Verstappen might be wary of what's coming, the grip levels, the balance, the setup, but the same doubts haunt McLaren. Vegas has been their curse.
Their bogey track.
In the last couple of seasons, it's the one place where the papaya orange has lost its glow under the neon lights. Let's remember, in 2023, Lando didn't even make it past lap 2. He hit a bump, the rear stepped out, and the dream ended against the cold concrete, under the glare of casino signs and shattered hopes.
Oscar Piastri?
He limped home in 10th, half a minute behind the leader.
And last year?
Las Vegas wasn't just a race, it was a Mercedes masterclass.
Ferrari right behind.
Verstappen only 5th, yes, but McLaren, they were nowhere. Lando finished 43 seconds off the win.
Oscar, 51.
That's an eternity in Formula One. Their Vegas record?
6th, 7th, 10th, and a DNF. Brutal.
Red Bulls?
1st and 5th.
And that's where the story could twist. Because if McLaren finally breaks the curse and wins in Las Vegas, if Lando pulls off something spectacular, then the championship, right there under the neon skyline, could be over.
Done. Finished.
But if the rumors inside the paddock are true, if Red Bull really is fighting some dark hidden flaw in the RB21 that echoes from Mexico to Nevada, then Max Verstappen's road back to glory just got a whole lot steeper. He needs perfection now, for flawless weekends, no mistakes, no damage. Because one bad race, one 5th-place finish while Lando keeps his head, and this fairytale comeback is gone. So we head to Sao Paulo, then to Las Vegas, the city that never sleeps, then into the blinding heat of Qatar, and finally the grand stage of Abu Dhabi. A triple header to end it all. Each race another chapter in a story that's twisting by the day. And just before we go, a reminder that Formula One drama doesn't always happen on the track. Felipe Massa's legal fight over the 2008 title, yes, that Crashgate year, is officially beginning. But don't get it twisted, he's not chasing the championship trophy anymore. He knows that ship has sailed. What he wants now is justice, £64 million worth of it. Damages for the chaos that rewrote history.
And you know what? Fair enough.
After everything that's happened in this sport, maybe it's about time someone tried to hold Formula One accountable for the shadows in its past.
So, your thoughts?
Is Las Vegas the night the championship ends, or the moment the fight explodes back to life? Hit that like button, drop your opinion in the comments. And as always, this is Zona DRS, where Formula One isn't just racing. It's drama, politics, emotion, and pure chaos on 4 wheels.